You're live in the CNN newsroom. I'm Dana Bash in Washington. President Trump is facing his most crucial week yet since moving into the White House. His first speech before a joint session in Congress. That's just 2 days away. Plus, a brand new version of his controversial travel ban is expected any day now. In the meantime, tonight, President Trump is hosting his first major social event at the White House, a black tie gala called the Governor's Ball. The president tweeted this: "Big dinner with governors tonight at the White House, much to be discussed, including health care." And, of course, we also have a spotlight on Hollywood's biggest night of the year, the Academy Awards. With millions watching, will anyone on stage get political? And how will Donald Trump respond? I want to bring in CNN's White House correspondent Athena Jones. And Athena, it sounds like the president is ready to talk health care, but do we think he's going to give any specifics, not just behind closed doors tonight, but also, of course, when he addresses Congress this week?
Hi, Dana, and also that meeting he has with the governors tomorrow here at the White House. It's not at all clear that the White House is ready to deliver specifics. We know there are proposals going around on Capitol Hill, and we know this is a huge priority and a huge challenge for this White House and for Republicans on Capitol Hill. This was one of the president's main campaign promises, and not a big speech goes by without him talking about the need to repeal and replace Obamacare. Republicans on Capitol Hill, on the House side, having voted already more than 50 times to replace the law. The problem is what to replace it with and how to make sure that the 20 million people who've gained coverage under the Affordable Care Act don't suddenly lose it. We're seeing a lot of town halls, as we've been reporting on the last several weeks, Republicans in districts across the country being confronted by constituents who are angry and who are worried about losing their health care. Ohio Governor John Kasich, who met with the president here on Friday and talked about Obamacare, talked about these town halls this morning on CBS's Face the Nation. Take a listen.
Look, I don't understand everything that's going on with these town halls, but what I think it's having an impact from the standpoint of, hey, the people are watching. I don't think they mind reform, but don't take everything away.
Right. Don't take everything away. And part of his point was don't take everything away from these 20 million people. Now, as you know, Dana, the president has said he promises to have a terrific plan that will cover everybody and cost less. It's just not clear exactly what that plan is going to look like. Dana?
Not clear at all. Athena, thank you so much for that report. And let's bring in our panel now to discuss this and more. Ryan Lizza, CNN political commentator and Washington correspondent for The New Yorker, and Sarah Westwood, White House correspondent for The Washington Examiner. Before I talk about the president's speech, Ryan, I want to start with you. CNN can now confirm a report from Politico earlier today that Press Secretary Sean Spicer is cracking down on leaks at the White House, so much so that he called staffers into his office and demanded to see their cell phones to make sure that they weren't part of corresponding with reporters. And he actually asked that staff not leak information about the meeting where he was talking about cracking down on the leaks. Oops, we hear about it. So I mean, look, I covered the White House, and obviously we talk to sources, all of us, all day long. And hope that their communications aren't being looked at by anybody, especially their bosses. What do you make of this? I'll start with you, Ryan.
Well, it always suggests a certain amount of paranoia when you have senior staffers to the extent that they don't trust the people working for them, that they have to do something like this. I can't remember anything specifically like this where the press secretary actually demanded to look at the personal electronics, but certainly in other White Houses, people go looking for the leakers in different sorts of ways. But I think just the big picture here is this is a White House where a certain amount of paranoia has set in because you have multiple power centers. And the leak according to Dylan Byers' piece it's on CNN.com, he said that Spicer was upset because the new communications director, the name of that new communications director was leaked a week ahead of time. Now, he is a friend and ally of Spicer, so perhaps he saw this leak as somehow undercutting him, right? And, that's when White Houses start to get really dysfunctional, when the factions start to go to war with each other in the press, and then they try and clamp down on the leaks, and that doesn't work, and it just, you get into that vicious cycle.
Yeah, absolutely. And Sarah, on the one hand, you have the president saying, you know, that the press is making up fake sources and fake news, and yet this seems to be an acknowledgement that they do believe that real information, as of course we know is a fact, is coming from people who are giving that information but asking that their names not be used.
It's clear that this is starting to bother the president, the fact that he dedicated a significant portion of his speech at CPAC to lamenting his White House's relationship with the media, but specifically the prevalence of anonymous sources and stories that are unflattering about his administration. Clearly, this is starting to bother President Trump. The pressure is on Sean Spicer if the leaks are coming from the communications department, as it appears some of these leaks are. So Spicer is under pressure probably from President Trump to put a stop to this to the extent that that's possible. Maybe that's why he's taking such aggressive measures. The problem is that it seems to be a vicious cycle. The more the White House tries to crack down on these leaks, the more aggressive they are in going after people who are potentially talking to reporters, the more information we seem to get from people who are a little bit disgruntled with that kind of treatment. So it's a double-edged sword. This kind of approach can chill the leaks for people who might be afraid to lose their jobs, but it can also cause people to leak more out of frustration.
That's true. Although I will say before we move on to the speech that, you know, it might not be the worst thing if you're Sean Spicer for us to be reporting that he's looking at people's phone if he wants people not just in the White House but around the administration to cut the leaks. But let's talk about the speech that's coming up this week. Very important speech. Ryan, before we talk about what we expect substance-wise, let's just talk about the atmosphere that the president is in, his approval ratings. Look at this new poll from McClatchy-Marist. The question there is, how does Trump's conduct as president make you feel? 58% say embarrassed, 33% say proud. What do you make of that vis-a-vis the fact that the president is, of course, going to be addressing the country, but a Republican-led chamber?
Well, first of all, with those numbers, with 58%, that means you have a good number of Republicans who are saying,
that's right,
who actually support him, because Republican support is like at 90% almost, who are still embarrassed by him. So sort of an interesting dynamic there. So, you know, it's hard with any kind of opinion poll these days about Trump to get anything but a 50-50 split. So that means there's a lot of Republicans who are saying that. Look, his overall approval rating is obviously lower than any modern president at this point in time. The issues that he has wanted to focus on and tended to focus on since he's been inaugurated have been security, both immigration, which he has reframed as a security issue, crime, and terrorism with the travel ban. What he hasn't focused on nearly as much as I think a lot of congressional Republicans would like him to is his domestic agenda, and that's really been lost. There's no infrastructure bill. There's no detailed health care plan yet. We don't have, obviously, a tax reform bill. So I think that balance will be interesting to see Tuesday night, is how much does he lay out, as a traditional president would in their first speech to Congress, a detailed legislative agenda that he asks this Republican Congress to push through.
No
and
question.
When he puts out his budget, how much detail do we get?
No question. And let's just drill down on one of the things you mentioned there, Obamacare. Sarah, he's obviously going to need support from Republicans in Congress to do that. It is the Republicans that are trying to figure out how to make this happen. Let's take a listen to what their former leader, the former House Speaker John Boehner, had to say about Obamacare.
I shouldn't have called it repeal and replace, because that's not what's going to happen. They're basically going to fix the flaws and put a more conservative box around it. It's not all that hard to figure out, except this. In the 25 years that I served in the United States Congress, Republicans never, ever, one time agreed on what a health care proposal should look like. Not once.
Nothing like not being in office to tell the truth, right? That was pretty remarkable. But Sarah, he is truth-telling there. He is being candid because he doesn't really have any reason not to be at this point. They don't have a cohesive plan. And also, he's talking about the fact that even though he led the way for House Republicans to vote umpteen times to repeal Obamacare, he doesn't really think the full repeal is going to happen. What do you make of it?
Well, you're exactly right. The Republicans are moving much more slowly than I think the Trump administration would like to issue a full repeal of Obamacare because they don't have a consensus as to what will replace it. This speech on Tuesday is a well-timed opportunity for Trump to put pressure on Republican members of Congress to do that full repeal, to say these are the promises you made when you were elected starting in 2010. These waves of Republican victories came almost entirely on the promise of repealing Obamacare. This is their one and only opportunity to repeal Obamacare because after 2018, even though the map favors Republicans heavily, you just never know what's going to happen. And so they shouldn't take this opportunity for granted to deliver on that promise if that's what they said they were going to do. Republicans are clearly anxious about what's going to happen. They need to end this uncertainty because all of Trump's other agenda items, tax reform, the federal budget, are so interconnected with Obamacare that this health care reform has to happen basically before they can move forward on much of anything else.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much to both of you. I'll tell you, every time there's a first with this president, it is fascinating to watch, and just the image of President Trump walking into that chamber and walking down that aisle and taking that very large stage is going to be really, really interesting to watch. Thank you so much for your insight, both of you. And as we mentioned, President Trump, as I was just talking about, that first address before Congress will be Tuesday. You can see it live right here, and stay tuned also for the Democratic response and reaction from across the country. Our coverage begins at 8 p.m. Eastern. And one more programming note, I'll be moderating a town hall with two outspoken GOP senators, John McCain and Lindsey Graham. That happens this Wednesday at 9 p.m. Eastern, right here on CNN. And coming up, President Trump says the race for DNC chairman was rigged. So what's the reaction from the man who won? We'll bring that to you. Plus, remembering actor Bill Paxton, from Twister to Titanic to The Terminator, we look back on his incredible career. And later, a commercial seeking the truth, the political message behind an ad you'll see during tonight's Oscars.
Talk is harmless. The truth is, we need to put the safety of the